Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just letting all the participants join and settle in. We will give just a few more minutes so everyone can get in and properly connect to their audio. It's nice to see so many friendly, familiar faces. What do you think, guys? Are we ready to go? Nikki, thumbs up, thumbs down? I think we've got a thumbs up. What do you think, Julius? Shall we get this party started?
I think we can get started.
All right. So, hi, everyone. My name's Erin Tranfield. I was at EMBL Heidelberg during the years of 2009 to 2013. And now I run the electron microscopy facility at the Instituto Gulbenkian de Ciencia just outside Lisbon, Portugal. It is a pleasure for me to be here today to be one of your co-moderators along with Julius, who we'll meet in just a second. And a fun green fact about myself is that I did my PhD actually studying air pollution and how it affects the heart. But these days I am learning how to compost and grow killer tomatoes in Portugal. So I'm trying to be green in science and in life. Julius, the floor is yours.
Hello, also from my side, from Vienna. My name is Julius Brennecke. I graduated from EMBL as a PhD student in 2003. And I'm never really left sort of the connections to EMBL. I'm now in the EMBL Alumni Association. And I'm really excited to be here with Erin and to chair this. We are both rather nervous. We've never done something like that before, so please bear with us. Also, maybe many of you wonder, what is EMBL or what can EMBL do in the context of the EU Green Week and also in the context of the challenges that we face on the planetary scale. Now, EMBL is the European Molecular Biology Laboratory. It's a intergovernmental organization. And I would say, well, it says it's one of the leading life science institutes in Europe. I would rather say EMBL has played probably the most important role in shaping modern molecular biology and the life sciences in Europe. And I'm particularly excited to see that EMBL now is also taking up sort of the new challenge and see how modern life science and life sciences can be intersected with the global challenges that we are facing. And I think it's no question that fundamental research is one of the, or has to be one of the solutions in those problems. And so like you, we are very much looking forward to this, to the next 2 hours. Erin, what can we expect? What's on the program?
Well, we have a pretty exciting day or session ahead of us today. We have a 2-hour time window. It's going to be tight, so bear with us as we try and pack all this in. Session 1, what we're planning to do is highlight the role of research and showcase how EMBL and our partner organization, the Terra Ocean Foundation, is using science to tackle pollution. And then after a short break, if we do have time, we're going to jump straight into session 2. And this, we're really going to try and talk about how science is not done alone. Science needs a lot of different players to support this environmental challenge. And we're going to have people from key sectors such as industry, government, as well as society and EMBL itself. So I think this will be a really nice joining of different communities together in this discussion. Now, before we get started, we'd like to just encourage everyone to do a few things. The first is please remember to write your questions in the chat. You'll see that the speakers are going to interact with each other by potentially raising hands and moving around, but with so many participants, it's going to be hard to take questions in a spoken format. So please add comments in the chat. We'll keep an eye out for them and try and incorporate them. Furthermore, we're going to leave time at the end of each session, if all goes well, for some of this dialogue. So we really hope you'll be as interactive with us as possible. This is only fun if you engage because, you know, this is where we're here. We would like to discuss with you. The last thing is, as you've probably noticed, is that this event is being recorded. So please be aware that it is being recorded, and by joining, you do consent to that. But the good news is we will hope to share this recording with you in the coming weeks. We're not totally sure the format how, but all registered participants will receive information on how to access that recording. Nush, can we go on, or shall we?
It would be great. So hi, my name is Menush Rayner. I'm head of alumni relations, and it's a great pleasure that we're hosting this event. It would be nice to tell you all who the participants are while we wait for some of our key speakers to join who is having some technical issues. So we would like to say that we have about, Erin, would you like to mention about participants?
Sure. So overall, as you can see, we have 137 people registered in this session, or attending at the moment in this session, but we have over 300 people. So you'll probably see some shifting in and out of the session as people join and come and go. People from all over the world joining, which is really lovely to see. I think to me that this says is that this is a question, or this is a format that is really important for people all over the world. It is important that we think about this and address this. Another thing to also bear in mind is that there's two elements to how research can sustain and protect our environments. There's how we work in this in our daily lives as scientists. Julius and I are both scientists at the bench, and we do have a role to play in protecting our environment. We will discuss this in a bit more detail in the second session, where Brendan will talk about some of the things that IGC is, or IGC, that's me, I'm trying to do that, what EMBL is doing to be more green. But for the first session, we're going to talk really about how research can give us knowledge and ideas and support us in coming up with technical solutions to our environmental problems. And so I think we're ready to start that session. What do you think, Julius?
Absolutely. It looks like we are all set. It is my real pleasure to introduce the first speaker, who is Professor Edith Hurd. Edith is probably best known amongst the scientific world as an inspiration in the area of epigenetics, in the area of X chromosome inactivation, for those of you who are biologists. And Edith took over the post of EMBL Director General 2 years ago. And I think, to me, really the big part now, or the big inspiration that Edith now plays, is to inspire not only molecular biologists, life sciences, but also the general public and political worlds in an absolutely, I think, unmet challenge that we are now having. And that's in the area of environment and in the area of planetary science. And I'm extremely happy to introduce Edith. And I think you are probably the most important person here, because without you, this entire thing wouldn't be taking place. And I mean it. And I'm really very happy to see you. Welcome. And we are looking very much forward to what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Julius. I hope you can all hear me. Is it okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what's happened, but I had to join through my telephone, so my apologies, because my computer gave up, it seems. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, both Erin and Julius, for the introductions and for being our presenters today. And I also wanted to thank the EU Green Week organizers for selecting this event as a partner event. So I guess what to say, here we all are connected by Zoom for a reason, and this event seems all the more relevant given the context of the pandemic that we're living through. I think the experience of COVID-19 has shown how easily catastrophe can befall our species, but thanks to science, it's being fought. So as scientists, we can help find solutions. And I just wanted to remind us all that the human lifespan has actually doubled in the last 100 years, thanks to the science of pasteurization, of antibiotics, of vaccines, and many, many other advances. And yet we know that today, due to mankind's impact on our planet, just 3% of the world's ecosystems remain intact, even though we know that functional ecosystems are absolutely essential to our survival on this planet. And it seems, I think, rather ironic that the United Nations declared that 2011 to 2020 was the decade of biodiversity. Well, now we have 2021 to 2030 as the decade of ecosystems restoration. So let's hope that works. In any case, what's clear is that scientists must help to find solutions, And this is where we hope that EMBL could maybe come in as well. And so let me just say a very few words about EMBL. I think most of you know what EMBL is, but just to highlight that we're really Europe's unique intergovernmental research organization for the life sciences. We were established in 1974, supported by over 27 member states now, and we work across 6 sites around Europe, in Barcelona, in Cambridge, Grenoble, Hamburg, Rome, and here where I'm located in Heidelberg. And across these sites, our research really spans all aspects of molecular biology, from structural biology and bioinformatics right through to neurobiology and disease modeling, and we hope beyond. And in addition to our mission to try and perform the very best research in molecular biology, we try to develop and offer the most vital services and infrastructures that scientists need in our member states and actually around the world. We help to train scientists, to host students and visitors at all levels. And we also actively engage in innovation and translation. And last but not least, we play an active role in trying to integrate European life sciences. And in today's pandemic, I think we really can see the need for long-term sustainable support to fundamental research, to open science, and to the research infrastructures that host scientists from across Europe and around the world. And so this discovery-driven basic research with the support, not just from public funds, but also from industry, has been key to allowing the rapid development of vaccines and therapeutics during this crisis. It's our best line of defense for future challenges as well, including those brought about by the legacy of pollution on our environment. So this pandemic has really brought home the need for us to understand life in all its forms in order to protect our own health and that of our planet. So to rise up to these global challenges and to find new solutions, apologies, EMBL is launching its new 5-year program, which we called Molecules to Ecosystems, and will start in 2022. So we're already preparing for it, and where we really want to seek to build on our existing and globally recognized expertise in molecular biology, and at the same time to reach out to new scientific areas that are relevant to ecosystems, be they human or planetary. And in doing so, EMBL hopes to discover more about life in its natural context, which is of course where life really happens, and thereby to prevent or even to prepare for new global challenges at the molecular level. So there are many areas that we've already started to work on, and you're going to hear about some of them today. We want to try and assess the impact of climate change and try to find solutions by looking at ecosystems at the molecular level and try and understand natural ways to fix carbon usage, for example, with algae that are already found in our oceans. We want to try and address biodiversity collapse. And EMBL searches are already trying to find out how marine animals such as the sea anemone are affected by their physical environments and what happens when that environment changes. And last but not least, of course, we work on disease. And most of disease, as I'm sure you all know, is actually due to the environment, be it cancer, diabetes, infection, or microbial disease. We need to understand what happens to our bodies when we're exposed to different environmental changes, including insults, and the impact of the drugs that we take. So in preparing to launch this ambitious new program, we also came to realize that EMBL, like all large research institutions, has 3 key responsibilities when it comes to sustainability. First, we have to perform research in an environmentally responsible way. Second, we can do research that is relevant to the issues that we're facing while still being fundamental. And third, we have to speak up and to promote sustainable science. We have to lead by example, not just through the research that we do, but the way we do it and through our practices. And that brings me to this event, which will showcase some of the projects that EMBL and our collaborators are embarking on in order to understand the science behind pollution and the impact of pollution on life. There's much to understand, much science to do, and whether this is using advanced imaging to see the surface of nanoplastic particles for the first time, or to try and understand which microbes are the best at breaking down pesticides in soils, or identifying which algae are the best at fixing carbon in different environments. All of this has to be sought after. And we hope that EMBL can help in this endeavor. So we're determined, with the support of our member states and our collaborators, to find answers to many of these questions. And I want to just say that the European Union's ambition to be a zero pollution continent by 2050 is, of course, to be hugely applauded. And we at EMBL will strive to contribute to this ambition through our research and our operations. So thanks to everyone for joining us today to hear from some of EMBL's researchers, from our alumni, and also to our friends from Tara Ocean Foundation and the Baden-Württemberg government. I'm so happy that Theresa Bauer was able to join us. And last but not least, also to Heidelberg Cement, who I'd like to sincerely thank for taking part in what I hope will be a memorable and important event. I'm really looking forward to it. And over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Edith. Wow, what a great introduction and what a great summary of that. And I have to say, extra props to Edith for managing to MacGyver a solution with her cell phone. You know, it's always these moments where we have a technical problem. So as Edith alluded to, science really doesn't happen in a bubble, and it doesn't happen just in the laboratory. This is a multifactorial thing that has to all come together. If I want to understand the environment and challenges like pollution, this needs to be done partially in the field. And this really is the core of what we're going to talk about in session 1. In this session, we want to show how life science research can be mobilized as a powerful tool to help tackle pollution. We have 4 fantastic speakers lined up for this who are going to give us a very small taste of what the amazing research they're doing and how this is trying to really support these initiatives. Now, I want to emphasize this for our audience. This is really just the tip of the iceberg of what these researchers are doing. Please look at the website links. Please go to the page because there's so much more information to be had and to be shared. This is really just to get you excited as we are about these great topics. Jumping to our very first 2 speakers who together represent the Tara Ocean Foundation, we have Ms. Romy Hettinger, Ms. Romy, I hope I said this properly, and Gabriel Gorski, Dr. Gabriel Gorski, who have joined us. Romy is part of the advocacy and the international cooperation project manager for Tara Ocean Foundation, and Gabriel is a member of the scientific community for the committee, for the Tara Foundation. The Tara Ocean Foundation is a key partner of EMBL. The 2 have been collaborating since the very first efforts where the schooner was a boat, Tara set out on an expedition in 2008. This has been ratified in April 2020 with a memorandum of understanding to really take this research beyond these first steps. For the public, what this means is a stronger partnership to really understand life science and the environment, more direct community outreach with private citizens, and stronger advocacy from a policy standpoint for the environment and science in general. Romy and Gabriel really have had the unique experience of seeing firsthand what is happening in our oceans, and they've seen this with our eyes to really understand the impact of pollution on these critical ecosystems. So starting with you, Romy, can you walk us through the basics? How important are the oceans, and are they well researched and understood?
Thank you, Irene, and thank you very much for this invitation. So I will start first saying that we all breathe thanks to the ocean. The ocean produces over 50% of the world's oxygen. It has also a very important role to regulate our climate. It absorbs 50 times more carbon dioxide than our atmosphere. It also supports the highest biodiversity. It provides living and non-living resources. It has also a very important potential for biotechnology in the futures. And all these roles, it's what we call the ecosystem services of the ocean. And we all live on Earth thanks to these services. And I would say also that the ocean is the last field of exploration. We know the importance of the ocean, but we know very little about how it functions. For example, we only start to understand the plankton. Plankton is tiny microorganisms who represent 95% of the marine biodiversity. And we need to understand this whole world, who is living in the ocean, where, how all these tiny microorganisms interact with each other, and what are their roles, especially for regulating the climate and also to feed the fishes, for example. And a number which is very interesting when you come to try to understand how much we know about the ocean is that less than 5% of the ocean has been explored. So in other words, humans have not yet explored or discovered about 65% of the Earth's surface. So there is a lot to discover, and it's very exciting to have these huge perspectives of research. And why this exploration is crucial is that we need this exploration to better understand the ocean, predict and adapt to future climate and environmental changes. We need also to understand the impact of our activities when it comes to pollution and plastic pollutions. We know to understand how we impact the ocean and how the ocean impacts us. That's why with our foundation, we explore the ocean with scientists from all over the world. We have interdisciplinary and international research. We also work with developing countries to share the knowledge and to have a common efforts of research. And we share all the data we produce with our expedition. And we have this chance to have Gabby with us to share his experience as a scientist on board Tara.
Thank you very much, Romney. So Gabby, can you tell us, how does the Tara work help us to achieve zero pollution? And what are some of the things you saw while you were out there doing that research?
Thank you for inviting me to this beautiful event, a very interesting one, original during this COVID period. I'm involved in Tara since 2007. And at the beginning, we aimed to learn about the plankton, as Romy explained you, because it was quite unknown and on planetary level. Tara is a relatively small boat. It's 36 meters long. It's a slow boat, it's a heavy boat, and it was not prepared to open ocean work. So we modified with Tara Foundation the boat, and what is original with Tara is that we can cover during 3 years, expedition of 3 years long, all the oceanic basins. We can make the round around the world with this boat without coming back necessarily to the port with stopovers. And we can really geographically cover all the basins. And this is what we did for plankton. And since 2014, we did it also for plastic. We started in Mediterranean, aimed on plastic, because the question was within the possibilities of Tara, and we could really efficiently work on the superficial ocean. And it is still, because we are continuing now, a wonderful occasion to really make science and including plastic. We had the first results in Mediterranean, which are quite interesting, about plastic as a vector of dissemination of different population, which are settling on plastic items. We saw the quantity and the relationship between land and the open ocean. And we got a lot of knowledge from Mediterranean. Then we made the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Then we made the river, land, open ocean, and now the South Atlantic Ocean. And everywhere we are working on plastic along with other topics, which are the plankton, biology, the genomics, and physics and chemistry in relationship with atmosphere, and of course with satellite measurements and so. So it's a multi-parametric, multi-dimensional work that we are doing. We are very happy to collaborate with EMBL on outstanding science done in EMBL. And so we are quite well tied now together and quite efficient.
What an incredible journey that was. And it continues to be. I think that the science coming out of this will feed into the research community for decades to come. Any last thoughts, Romney, in terms of, you know, the overarching outcomes of this journey and the Terra Ocean effort?
Sorry.
Yeah.
It was a question for me. Sorry.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? I mean, what were your final thoughts in terms of the zero pollution motion or method that will come out of this?
Yeah, for the zero pollution, it's as a foundation, we work on this zero pollution by exploring, as Gabby said, that exploring with different expeditions, and also with this very research focus to understand how biodiversity interacts with microplastics to understand the impacts on our human health, but also for to work on this zero pollution objective, to sharing our knowledge with the public, with citizens. And during our stopovers, because during our expedition, we organize different stopovers. We share our experience. We also talk, it's very interesting to talk with people to talk about false good ideas. For example, the idea to clean the ocean, which is illusory to clean the ocean. And our message is that the solutions are on land, and we have to work with all the different actors.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it really a remarkable project. Sorry to cut in a little bit because of the time reasons. What I take also out of it is that this original idea then got into the problem of the plastic and plastic pollution, and that already or immediately leads over to the next speaker or the next guest we have. So the problem of microplastics and maybe even nanoplastics and nanoparticles is one that really over the last few years only has emerged. And I think it's a fundamental issue that we are facing. And I'm very excited to introduce Melissa Gravert, Dr. Melissa Gravert, who's here joining us from EMBL Outstation in Hamburg. So she's the senior technical officer at EMBL Outstation in Hamburg, and she is an expert in studying tiny things with huge machines, in this case, beamlines, X-ray technology, etc. And while we typically in biology study protein structures with those technologies, you can evidently also look at nanoparticles or nanoplastic particles with those technologies. So, Melissa, I understand that you guys started a new project on nanoplastics. You are funded by the Friends of EMBL and the EMBL Environmental Research Initiative, a very new funding initiative for these environmental projects. Can you explain to us a little bit what's going on? What's the problem of nanoplastics, and why do we need to research this topic?
Thanks, Julius, and I'd like to thank everybody for including our little baby project that we just started in this discussion. I think it's really timely, very important to be talking about plastic pollution. And so what we're focusing on, or we want to start studying now in more detail, is the nanoplastics. So we've been hearing about the plastics that they were seeing out in the oceans and all the rivers and how they got there. But there's also these really tiny, tiny bits that are coming now more into focus. And these are the nanoplastics, which are so small that we can't see them. So if you just imagine a ruler, and there we have the segmentation into millimeters, and if we cut that down further, so we do 1,000 little segments, we get to the micrometer. So that's how tiny it is. And the nanoplastics we're looking at are smaller than these microplastics. So the challenge is that they're so small that we can't see them with the normal analytical tools, and also like the sieves and everything that they're using on the Tara to collect their plastics. These nanoplastics will go straight through. So even though they're so small, they've been starting to be detected everywhere. So we have them in the soil, we have them in the water and in the air, and they're just out there, and we still can't really grasp the threat that they pose. But the scientists are pretty convinced that because of their small size, once they get into us or also to the fish and to plants, they'll be able to spread because of their properties. They'll be able to go into the organs, spread throughout the tissues, and we're not quite sure yet what kind of threats they actually will be posing. And this is something that really has to be addressed currently and is really being pushed and also being addressed from many different aspects. And
just to understand this, Melissa, where is this broken down plastic, or does it come from different sources? Where does it come from?
Yes, so if the microplastics there, we had the two parts. We had the broken down plastics that get smaller and smaller to the microplastics, but we also had the microplastics that were actually added by industry into stuff like in the shampoos and the soaps and everything. But these nanoplastics are really these plastic bits that are coming from the stuff that's getting smaller and smaller, especially out in the oceans where we have the UV shining on them and help making them break down. But we also have the waves and the winds and the currents that are rattling up everything and just getting the plastics to break down. Mm-hmm. So with our machine, our advantage of our technology, so we have the specialized synchrotron technology that we use. So we have these X-rays that can help us see the smaller stuff that we can't see with a normal light microscope. And we measure in solution. So we'll be able to look at the plastics in their native state. And we hope that we'll be able to bring a new aspect to these studies, because many of the studies done so far, they've done with proxy. So they have nano-engineered particles that you can create in the lab and you can study these. But we want to now use our technology to compare these with actual plastics that we can find out in the nature. So they're all pretty exciting to look at it. Currently, we're looking, we're making baseline studies. So we're studying the typical plastics and trying to look at them. And a colleague of mine stands in the lab and he's shredding coffee lids with his blender, and then we put it inside our machine and look at them to understand what we're actually going to be looking at. And now we're getting ready to go out and collect samples and look in the oceans and rivers and to see what we can see that's out there.
Mm-hmm. And so you see the key value of your research primarily in raising awareness of the problem and also showing how these nanoparticles and nanoplastic particles can be dangerous for human health and or the environment, so that we increase the pressure to do something about reducing input into the oceans. Is that?
I mean, that's yes, but also to understand solutions then. So if we can assess what the baseline is, then we can also, if we have solutions like new kinds of microorganisms that can break down the plastics, or if we're looking down what happens to the new biodegradable plastics, and if they actually also end up into being nanoplastics, we have to be able to assess this too. So the tools and the protocols that we and many others are establishing will hopefully be able to help us also assess the quality and the goodness of new methods to actually find solutions. Mm-hmm. And for the awareness, I hope that seeing the turtle stuck up in plastic is awareness enough to think about stopping plastic pollution. But of course, if people think about the plastics getting to the brain or getting even to the unborn babies, I think that's even will ring more bells and actually get people to consider when they're in the supermarket if they should actually buy the less plastic, and hopefully be incentives for people to rethink their habits.
Right. I also have the feeling that this is typically one of the strongest motivations for people when they are worried about their own health or that of their children. So where do you see the biggest issue here in terms of human health, that these nanoparticles? I read something interesting that they might carry chemicals and or other hormones or etc. into cells, etc. Is that?
So where you had normal spherical with a round surface, you don't have much of a surface, but these plastics that are coming from breaking up the plastic, they actually have a pretty big surface to mass ratio. And this could be a danger too, because they can work as carriers, and pathogens and toxins or like heavy metals can actually attach to these plastics and be transported with them on their journey. Mm-hmm. So this is also something that we'll be looking into, yeah.
And if you just, so there was a question also from the chat, how do you really see in your machine whether this is a piece of plastic or not some other biomolecule?
So that's of course the biggest challenge too, because when we have the environmental solutions, we're also going to have other stuff that are in similar sizes. So we'll have some broken down proteins, we'll have some cellular structures, and we'll work on filtration systems to be able to remove those too. But there are some characteristics that will point to the plastics. And this is also where it's not one technology that's going to solve the solution. It's scientists coming together and everybody bringing their expertise and then forming a coalition and trying to tackle this problem from many, many sides. So that's why I really applaud what Edith was mentioning in the beginning, that we should look out of our scientific bubble and we should actually approach new ways. And this is something that's made this journey so far exciting, is to look outside our bubble.
And maybe one very, very quick last one and quick answer. Is there any plastic that is worse or better in terms of the breakdown and nanoparticle production?
Of course, they're all going to be differently. And of course, I guess the less additives and the less other chemicals that are being added to it will make it more easier. I assume, I mean, it's hard to say. We can, of course, say the plastic that sinks down to the ocean ground and we don't see anymore might feel better for us because it's out of our sight. But of course, we do not know the harm. And like Romy was mentioning, we don't know of all the organisms waiting down there, and you have to deal with the plastic that we're sending down to the ocean bottoms. So yes, I think that's also the challenge, because nanoplastics are so diverse. So we'll have to find many different solutions.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much, Melissa. This is exciting, and I wish you all the best in your project.
Thank you.
And this is fantastic, and well done, Julius, in sneaking some of the chat questions into your on-the-fly questions. Beautifully done. I wish we could stay in the oceans for much longer, but it should be said that the Earth is not just made of oceans. There's also the important component of land. And so let's just take a step onto land and recognize that pollution affects the oceans as well as the inland places. And pollution from the ocean will actually seep into some of our on-land areas and our sort of transitional ecosystems. So moving on to our next speaker, we have Detlev Arnott. He is a senior scientist at EMBL Heidelberg, and he is a key player in setting up a new initiative called the Green EMBL Initiative. This is a new area of research at EMBL, and it's really focused on planetary biology science. Now, Detlev holds many different hats at EMBL, but today he's going to join us to talk about some of these different points. The Planetary Biology Initiative involves many research projects which will help us to understand how the environment is impacting life, including the impact of pollutants on the environment. Detlev, thank you for joining us. And can you share with us EMBL's plans to improve our understanding of land-based pollution?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Erin, for the intro. First of all, I can tell you we don't have to leave the ocean and the sea completely for the moment, as we very much focus also with our plans on the land-water interface. So on the coastline, you'll see this in a minute. So yes, we have this new direction at EMBL, which is very exciting, which all started a few years ago now, with which we refer to scientifically as planetary biology. So if our aim is to understand the consequences of pollution, we have embarked in this new area of science that we call planetary biology. And maybe just a word on this. So what is that? What do we mean by this? This in a way combines ecological research, evolutionary research, also geosciences, with what is really EMBL's expertise, which is the molecular biology. So we want to know if there is pollution out there, if this is impacting on the organism, what is really happening at the molecular level, mechanistically. So this is what we need to understand. And you can basically go in two directions with this research. One is that you establish model systems. So we do what we are used to do in the lab. We bring organisms to the lab and research the impact of pollutants, for example, on these systems. This can be single species that we look at. It can be symbiosis, very interesting mutual benefit relationship between few organisms, whole communities, whole ecosystems that we bring into the lab, and then we can see how do they react. And then you might know this can be at two levels. So this can be in a way in an evolutionary adaptational way. So we can with these organisms we can do micro evolution experiments, experimental evolution. For example, a colleague of mine, Julius Crocker, is investigating flies exposes them to chemicals of a chemical library, and then can find out what how over generations these flies react to pollutants. Yeah, we can also investigate directly if there's an organism not able to evolve because the pollution is happening right now, we can study something that is called acclimation. So how do, at the molecular mechanistic level or cellular level, how do organisms react to immediately to challenges such as pollution? And you can already guess that this is a very exciting, in that the experimental systems can be very small, but they can also be a little bigger or really big in terms of having several cubic meters in an experimental setup all of a sudden, where we can study these environmental influences and pollution consequences. And then there's, of course, the direction that is in a way very new to EMBL, where the experiences with Tara, where we're starting this at EMBL. This is to go out into nature, out into the field, and study the impact of pollution in the field. And again, we can focus there on looking at specific model systems in the field, but rather also we can study whole communities and entire ecosystems. And there again, it is really to see, first of all, and in the detail, what is out there, and how do these, for example, microbial communities that we sample, how do they respond to pollutants that we also measure? Yeah, so we do both. We sample organisms. We also with microsensors directly sense the pollutants that are present on site in situ, out in nature. And you can imagine this needs a lot of sophisticating new sampling strategies, a very close monitoring of local conditions with microsensors, as mentioned. And I think the most important and also in a way most exciting part for us with this new planetary biology is that it is highly collaborative. So I think there has never been a project at EMBL that has attracted in a way so many collaborators Europe-wide, where we engage with scientists of all kinds in marine biologists, chemists, oceanographers. We already heard one with Gabi Gorski, climatologists, physicists, etc. So this is really a multi collaborative event.
So Detlef, this is fascinating. You're talking a lot of different topics, a lot of different players. Why is it important that scientists are doing this? What is the goal? What will be, where will this information be used in the future?
Well, we know that pollution has a lot of negative impact on the environment, but just to be clear, so far this knowledge is only spot-wise, and we know it here and there, and we have examples, but we don't have a comprehensive view, and we also don't know how the organisms react in the molecular detail or in the cellular detail, and we need to know this. I mean, if you take the analogy of human health, it is good to have a rough idea that something is harmful to, for example, to the human, but at the end we need to know exactly what happens. We need to know if there is this pollutant, what is this pollutant doing exactly at the molecular mechanistic level, to single out actually the ones that are especially harmful, the ones that are especially impactful. Yeah, maybe also you could turn it around and say, okay, these are pollutants that we suspected to be very harmful, but maybe they're not that much as others. So it isn't, in fact, of filling our gaps in the knowledge of what is going on out there in nature.
And in a perfect world, imagine you would find pollutant 1 and pollutant 2. If you knew that pollutant 1 was much more hazardous to the community, you could actually say, this is where we need to shift policy. This is where we need to shift our efforts, because we want the greatest impact to come from reducing the more hazardous toxins. Would you agree with that perspective? I
would totally agree. I mean, we have at the end, we as scientists, we can at the end give educated advice. So we can have looked at pollutant 1 and pollutant 2 and say, yes, we have the facts. We have the data here that says that this one is especially harmful, more than that one. And then I would say an equally important part of planetary biology is actually the outreach. So yes, we have to reach out to the public. We have to, in fact, address whoever we can in society. This can reach from citizen science projects, which are especially exciting, actually, especially along the coastline, for example, yeah, where we are planning this big expedition. But also reach out to schools. Yeah, we have our life science learning laboratory at EMBL that is now also engaged with us in planetary biology and developing strategies just to tell school kids, teachers, and so on about what is going on.
It's absolutely crucial.
yeah.
The science we know, the science we do has very little value if it stays in our labs. We have to get it out and we have to share it with our community. And I just received a direct message from Izan. Izan, you will see that the answer to your question about where you can find out more information is in the links Nikki's sharing. So we really encourage all of our audience members to delve into these links because there's lots of accessible information here that is being shared. Julius, I think you have our last speaker, which is a fantastic extension. Detlev, thank you for this great introduction to this amazing planetary biology. Now we learn a little more about one of these projects.
Yeah, thanks, Detlev. I think this just illustrated the importance of science to not only just simply catalog, but also to understand what the impact is of pollutants or on the environment. And while cataloging and gaining the knowledge about this is one very crucial aspect, the other one is also simply to do something about it. And one very particular example of pollutants are pesticides that, as we all know, are being heavily administered in agriculture. And so those pesticides evidently will accumulate and will cause major consequences on ecosystems. And our next contributor, Dr. Richard Jacobi, he's a biochemist at EMBL in Heidelberg. And again, he's funded by the new funding initiatives at EMBL, Friends of EMBL and the Environmental Initiative. And he very particularly is interested in how pesticides can be dealt with on the level of microbes and whether microbes can be a solution for that rather big problem. Richard, welcome. I'm very much looking forward to your contribution.
Yes, thanks for having me, Julius, and thanks for all of the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk about my project.
Maybe just very directly, what happens to pesticides when I mean we are administering tons of them into the environment? What happens to them? Do they remain in the environment? How long and how much of a problem really is it?
Yes, look, it's a major pollution problem. And the reason is that they're administered in a massive overdose on farm. So only about 1% of the pesticides that are applied on their farm actually hit that target organism and poison the insects or the fungus or whatever they're trying to kill on the farm. So that means the other 99% actually dissipate out into soils, into streams, into rivers, eventually into the ocean.
So, and then they obviously accumulate. I mean, in the ocean, we can easily say, I mean, yeah, they will be diluted heavily, but what about in soil? I mean,
this is where my project comes in, because chemicals in the environment have a half-life.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is that these chemical structures don't stay the same forever for the rest of time. The vast majority of all known chemicals degrade with time. And the interesting thing, and as a biochemist with an interest in microbial metabolism, the interesting thing about pesticides is that microbes are the main way that pesticides are degraded in the environment. Microbes have specialized metabolism. So that means they can metabolize chemicals that other organisms might find toxic or that other organisms cannot break down in any way. But there are huge knowledge gaps in this field. We don't know which pesticides are metabolized by which microbes. And my project involves doing fundamental research to find out the answer to that question.
But evidently, many of the pesticides are new to nature. And so do you think microbes could be a solution to all of those as well? Or
look, I think there's huge opportunities in the future for microbes to be dealt with in a smarter way to handle pesticide pollution. So even if in a chemical factory you synthesize a completely new chemical, there might be a pre-existing microbial enzyme that already has the catalytic capacity to break that down. But I think what we more generally need, stepping back, is that chemical companies need to think, what is the environmental fate of this pesticide? And not just how quickly does the parent structure disappear, but all of the downstream products, how toxic are they, and how fast is it until that pesticide that's released into the environment is degraded into completely inert things. Mm-hmm. And for chemical companies to do this, they really need to have a better understanding of microbiome science. And I think the microbial biochemists have to go a bit more into the chemical world and figure out, well, all of these pesticides that are out there, how are they broken down and by which microbes? And the good thing about EMBL is that there's a really high technological capacity to deal with these questions at high throughput level and also with very mechanistic insight.
But can you give us a bit of a concrete example? So you're now having a research project, and let's say you start with pesticide X or family X, chemical family, and what's the next step?
Okay, there is a lab element to the project where we take that pesticide X and inoculate that into the growth medium of microbe A, microbe B, microbe C, microbe D, and we wish to see whether those different microbes, whether that panel of microbes has the capacity to break down pesticide X. And that's all happening in the laboratory. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other element where we want to go out into the field in collaboration with the Tara Coastline Expedition and say, what is the abundance of that pesticide X in the environment? And are there any correlative links between the microbes that are in that sample, that are in that environment, and whether they are, whether those environments exhibit a rapid breakdown of that pesticide? Because then we can start formulating microbial solutions to these pesticides. Start to say, okay, this is pesticide X, this is the microbes that can break it down. Are there any ways that we can stimulate the abundance of that microbe, all those microbial genes, to clean up these contaminated areas?
So the idea would be we have contaminated areas and we have designer microbes that help cleaning up in a way.
This is where it becomes more of a engineering issue and kind of a practicality issue, because there's a history of applying microbes into the environment, and they do not persist well. So that's where the challenge comes. Let's say you do have microbes that are very adept at breaking down pesticide X. Then your challenge is saying, well, how do we now do this as a bioremediation approach? Can we somehow inoculate this microbe into the target environment? Or can we somehow do that in a sewerage treatment plant before the microbe leaves the farm and enters the river? Can we, in the bioreactor of the sewerage treatment plant, inoculate these adept microbes there? Because these sewerage treatment plants are kind of the gatekeeper, where agricultural practice meets the uncontrolled environments of rivers and streams.
This is super fascinating. I'm going to jump in. There's been some really interesting questions in the chat. And I have to say, Richard, you're making me really happy that I don't use pesticides in my own garden. And I grow my monster tomatoes just by using a good old fertilizer from chickens. But Francesca has a really nice one. She asks, regarding the microbes project, is there a greater benefit to studying one environment over the other? So for example, oceans or agricultural land or parks versus cities. Do you see different profiles? I would say I'm paraphrasing. I hope I do okay, Francesca. Paraphrasing how you see different pesticides in different habitats and how different different microbes could help that.
So there's a literature here. People previously have gone out and taken samples of environmental ecosystems and observed which pesticides are there. And as a general rule, the more agriculture is nearby, the more pesticides are there. But the other thing is these things do travel through waterways and even through evaporation and rainfall. So even what we would consider as pristine national parks do have some trace levels of pesticides. What we want to do is really connect this to microbes and get mechanistic insights. how are these pesticide accumulation levels correlated to microbial levels? And can these microbial technologies give us any levers we can pull to reduce the impact of pesticides in the future?
This is this is fantastic. As a Canadian, I'm not sure all of our parks have pesticides. I would hope they don't, because we have such a big country, but I think it's a scary thought that pesticides permeate our environment so profusely and can impact this. There's a great question in the chat. I'm going to try this on the live. So let's see if we can do this. Dia, do you want to ask your question live? Peter, can you find this person who's asking this great question and see if you can unmute them? Peter's going to kill me. It's okay. It's the Canadians. We sabotage each other. Ah, here she is. Dia, tell us your question for Richard, please.
Yeah, so I was thinking about bioaccumulation of pesticides, and Richard was talking about microbial degradation in soil, but I just worry that if we completely bank on the metabolic capabilities of microbes to degrade it in soil, what if it bioaccumulates before it completely gets broken down? Because there are so many ways to bioaccumulate. So I was just wondering, has there been any way you've tackled that or thought about it?
This is a good question, and it's completely outside of the scope of my project, but I'm a curious person. I like to speculate. Obviously, these things, bioaccumulation is a phenomenon. That, you know, the first small fish eats the pesticide, the bigger fish eats the pesticide, the bigger fish eats a small fish which contains the pesticide, and up it goes. One thing is that these fish, or any other organism you care to mention, they will have a microbiome inside them. So it could be that within the fish or whatever, that the microbe could be responsible for the biodegradation. But on the other hand, these fish also have their own detox systems that can maybe detoxify the pesticide when it's inside the fish. But obviously, bioaccumulation is a huge problem with pesticides, and chemical companies know this. Chemical companies try to design pesticides that don't bioaccumulate.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think we are, in the interest of time, we need to, unfortunately, already wrap up session number 1.
But I was having so much fun, Julius. Why do we have to end?
But I think we got a very interesting glimpse of what's going on at EMBL. Also a glimpse of what are the challenges that are out there and how one might be able to tackle them. Do you want to give us a quick wrap up, Erin?
I don't know if I could do justice to that session. It was so interesting. So I think, you know, we've really started looking at expeditions that have happened in the oceans. We've then tried to understand how some of the information that was collected during the Terra expedition has fed into current science. This brings us on to future planetary science, the vision of understanding this network between, or this connection, I'd say, between the ocean and the land, right at that interface, as explained by Detlef. And now Richard has filled us all with a bit of a fear, I would say, of pesticides and an understanding of why we need to mitigate this and how we need to do something about it. So what a fantastic start to this. A big thank you to all of the people, all the panel members who've been a part of this. And furthermore, a really big thanks to all the people who are commenting in the chat. You're distracting me, I have to say. It's lovely to see so many people engaging. So thank you for this. I think, though, that now we have to move on to the second session, which is a really big discussion as well. Now, in the second session, we're going to want to talk about how industry and government and science all comes together with the help of you, our audience, which is our general society, to make this change and bring it into practice. I think we have, because we're doing really well, Julius. You and I are tough as timekeepers. I mean, whew, we're right on time. So everyone, you have a very brief, small biological break. We'll call it. Be back in 5 minutes, and we will continue with the next session. So just as everyone starts to come back, please don't forget to check out the linked documents. There is a lot of great resources there that will help you learn more information about all the amazing science that was presented in the first session. it's really unfortunate there is not enough time to cover everything and discuss everything. So please know you are really just getting the very, very brief introduction of so much incredible things that are happening at EMBL, all their different member stations. All right, in keeping with time, I think we're at the top of the hour. Where is my co-host Julius? Come to the surface, Peter.
I think I'm right here.
Yeah, but we can't see you.
Can't see me.
There you are. There you are. Perfect. Thanks, Peter.
Wonderful. Okay, welcome back, everybody. After session 1, which I think really gave us a taste and showcased activities, initiatives, visions at EMBL, we in session 2 want to do the challenging attempt to bridge science to the other sectors that are essential in solving problems. I really think Edith Hurd has mentioned it also in her quick intro. The pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, I think has showcased dramatically that solutions to big problems can only be found when political stakeholders, scientists, and in the end also the private sector come together and have a common vision and shape the solutions. And so that's sort of the umbrella and the idea of session 2. We have representatives from research, industry, and government, and we would like to probe their ideas or their experiences and their suggestions in how we can find the solutions. And so it won't really be a round table discussion, but we have 4 speakers, and we'll just very briefly introduce the 4 to then go step by step and have them say their messages. So it's my honor to introduce the Minister Theresia Bauer. She is the Minister of Science, Research and Arts in Baden-Württemberg. That is a state in Germany. And she has been minister for the last 10 years, since 2011. Theresia is a strong advocate of EMBL, and she also is a strong advocate for free research and a strong believer in, I think the creativity and the power that sits with the creative fields, including the sciences. She has been the Minister of the Year 3 times, and we are very pleased to have you here. Maybe Erin introduces our second guest.
Absolutely, Teresa. It's nice to see you and nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Another very important and exciting part of this discussion is to have Mr. Christoph Reisenfelder. I hope I did that last name justice, Christoph. He is a political scientist and head of government liaison office in Berlin. He has spent many years working on the development of Heidelberg Cement sustainability strategy. And Christoph has taken on the brave challenge of actually trying to represent industry in this discussion. Now, Heidelberg Cement has initiated and co-organized several different conferences with EMBL. They're really focused on trying to reduce their CO2 emissions. And they even have gone so far as to contribute to the new imaging center. In the initial discussions leading up to this meeting, I learned some really interesting things from you, Christoph, about how Heidelberg Cement is doing some great stuff to try and reduce pollution. And I'm really glad you can join us today to share that with the general public.
All right, our third guest representing science is Professor Matthias Henze. Matthias is probably the best representative for EMBL since he has been there for over 30 years now. Matthias is EMBL director, and he's in the world of science extremely well known as a renowned RNA biologist. SARS-CoV-2, by the way, is an RNA virus, so that's nothing new for Matthias. Matthias, I think, is also a very interesting character when it comes to representing EMBL to the outside, not only to the to politics, but also to societies. And I think this is also the reason why he launched very recently initiatives to support research financially in the area of environment. And so the idea to have philanthropic initiatives is really to a large extent based on Matthias's initiatives. And so we are very happy that you are here, and we'll talk in a second.
And rounding out our panel of four, we go from Matthias, who's been at EMBL for 30 years, to Brendan, who joined in the middle of a pandemic and has maybe been on campus once or twice, but it's still great to have you here, Brendan, with us. So Brendan, MBL in Heidelberg in March 2020, and your role is really to lead the initiative to make EMBL more sustainable in how you do science within the organization. Brendan has also held different roles, and he is an EU Climate Pact ambassador. So he's working at multiple different scales. So let's start with you, Brendan. I alluded to this in our very first moments in this discussion. Science itself is very crucial in how we prepare for this, but it's also very important that we do science in a sustainable way and we try and reduce the impact we have on the environment. So can you, Brendan, give us an overview of the strategy EMBL is embarking on to be more sustainable and to be more green?
Delighted to, thank you. So as having done a few sustainability strategies for different types of organizations now, I think there's a few key points that have to be made. First of all, the most successful strategies are about alignment with the core business, so keep that in mind. And the second one is that it involves a wide-ranging consultation. So EMBL started this sort of journey 3 or 4 years ago, and it's very much a staff-led initiative. The staff have been the ones that raised their voice, that said that EMBL should be more conscious of its environmental impact. And gratefully, we've got great leadership. And Edith, when she joined, really picked up that baton, and I think has pushed EMBL now to almost the fore of this, having a great grassroots community wanting this, as well as the leadership being shown. So I was joined last year to help deliver this. So, like I say, consultation is very important. So we had done a materiality assessment last year. We spoke to internal and external stakeholders, people who showed an interest in the environment and people who had also previously not really shown an interest in this. And we spoke to them about what were the key parts of EMBL's activities that have an environmental impact and that we should focus on. So thankfully for me, one of the things that came out with that is that it really does align with EMBL's core business. We are a research organization and we can do amazing research on the environment and environmental impact. And I think, today we've started to show that. Matthias's environmental research initiative is also an extension of that. So we've got the opportunity here to have a really great sustainability strategy. So we've got 3 pillars to the work that we're doing, 3 work streams. The first one is doing environmentally responsible research. So that's really focused on how we act, our processes, with a focus on our energy use and carbon footprint, the amount of resources and waste that we generate, the emissions associated with our business travel, and then finally, the construction that we do. So we've got some plans for some new buildings to make sure that we build really sustainable buildings, because they're going to be with us for the next 60 years. Then there's doing environmentally relevant research, aligning with our core business and doing things like this. And then finally, it's about promoting sustainable science. So we've got one of the few sort of European-wide science voices. We care about this, and I think it's important that we share the messages and the learnings that we come up with and try and bring other life science organizations along with us.
And you're doing a great job, because I'm on board and we're here in Portugal trying to implement some of these exact changes. Now, something that our public might not know actually is, for example, one of our freezers consumes as much energy as a single household. And this is, it sounds very trivial, but this is something that in science, we have a few high consuming things that are hard to avoid. And I know, speaking from our side, is that just simple changes in temperature can have a huge impact. So these are the kinds of things you're trying to do in a tangible way, right, Brendan? These hands-on, small changes that go a long way.
That's it. There are a few things in life science research that are really energy intense, like you say, the deep freezers, which is if we take EMBL, for example, the number of small these deep freezers we have, we're talking about the kind of energy use of a smallish German village just for our deep freezers. And there are techniques and stuff we can do to mitigate that, keeping them clean and the filters fresh and throwing out old samples and looking at the temperature that we set those to.
So maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, because the next question I have for you are, what are 2 bits of advice where you give your audience? But I guess one of them could be, make sure you defrost your freezer on a regular basis at home and in work, right? In the lab.
Yeah. I mean, so for our scientists who are watching, it's about making sure that we reduce as much as possible the energy use by turning things off, by maintaining our equipment, by being very considerate of the amount of consumables that we use. There's lots of consumables in the lab, and that comes with lots of packaging. So, you know, it's everyday decisions and identifying suppliers that have made the effort to reduce their packaging. Using your voice, not just your vote, but, you know, vote with your wallets. If you show a preference for buying environmentally sustainable products, the market will respond, politicians will respond to that. I mean, some of the great things that we've done at EMBL already. So we last year installed our first very large solar PV. We have got EV charging points. We're installing a hub of e-bikes for our staff here to use. Our canteen has already moved to be sort of zero plastic. So these are kind of big things that we can do as an organization, but then again, it's working with our staff and to everybody who's listening. I think lots of people know, we already know what sort of behaviors we need to do individually to achieve a more sustainable lifestyle. It's just about doing it. It's about everyday considerations of your choices. And like I say, voting with your.
So Brendan, can I quickly jump in? So if I get this correct, I mean, or also knowing from the place here, there are little initiatives all over the place, because the awareness is, I think, there. Mm-hmm. Some solutions might be there. Is there a network that you can share where people that are interested in from various research institutions can tap into, so to share best practices? And there has also been an interesting question on the chat. The data science production, I mean, servers, computers are a major energy consumer. And maybe you have a few words, and then we need to move on already on that front, possible solutions.
Yeah, so there's a scattering of sort of networks across Europe for specifically life science sort of researchers. There's one in Austria, there's one in France, there's one in Holland, in the UK. It isn't across Europe. There are still countries that don't have networks themselves. It's something that I'm aware of. I'm looking into with a number of other people across Europe is can we fill that void, or can we create something that will link all of the different existing country networks and fill those gaps and really promote this in the countries that don't have. After I've spoken, I'll drop some links into the chat for different sort of resources that you know, talk about sustainable lab practices. The second question, sorry, Judith, could you remind me?
The second question was, but very briefly, is just on the computer server front.
Oh,
is there any solution for that one, or?
I mean, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue, and it's growing. I mean, again, there is lots of advice out there on this. It's about the maintenance of servers and server rooms and making sure that the temperatures that they're being allowed to rise to is significant. You know, we don't need to go lower than we really need to. So making sure that we're trying to balance the environmental protection with making sure that those rooms stay cool. Then there's a lot of research coming out now, which is literally the impact of people's coding and algorithms, and running coding and running these algorithms only when needed, and testing on a smaller sample size. Don't test on the huge data set and things like that.
I think these are great examples of where sharing knowledge, best practices immediately to other organizations worldwide can have really quite an impact. Thank you so much, Brendan. This was very important, and I think everybody who's interested, maybe hook up to Brendan. And there has also been a chat where a database or a networking place has been already posted. Thanks so much. And I'm very excited to move over to Christoph Reisfelder. He was already introduced as a representative of Heidelberg Cement. That might come to us as a surprise to some of us. We have had a pre-chat. It was very exciting. Christoph, Heidelberg Cement, huge company listed at the DAX, huge carbon footprint. What's going on? And you have set yourself an ambitious goal to be sort of carbon neutral by 2050. How is that possible? This seems like a very ambitious goal. And can you share with us your visions of how to reach this, and also how science and how EMBL, a partnership with basic research and also politics, can play a role here?
Thank you, Julius. Indeed, it's a quite ambitious target that we gave ourselves. So our target is basically to achieve carbon neutrality in our end product, concrete, by 2050, the latest. Concrete is basically sand and gravel, water, and cement, which is the magic ingredient to harden the concrete in the end of the day. So it's the binding material. And there lies the challenge for us in the end. Cement is made from limestone, and from a chemical perspective, CaCO3 becomes, when it's being heated up, CaO and CO2. And this CO2 is an unavoidable process emission, or an unavoidable amount of CO2 that we have to take care of.
Mm-hmm. And just very briefly, sorry to interrupt, how much of the output of Heidelberg Cement is due to this chemical reaction?
So when you look onto a global scale, 2/3 of our direct emissions are process emissions, or these unavoidable volumes. So when you would like to calculate it, we have overall on a global scale roughly 78 million tons of direct CO2 emissions. So 2/3 of that, so quite a huge bunch, is basically this unavoidable volume that we have to take care of. So what we are doing to reduce our carbon footprint is basically the classical business as usual, I would call it. So this is reducing our energy demand via energy efficiency investments, substituting fossil fuels with biomass, and in the future, likely with hydrogen as well, which is green and carbon neutral. But as I said, this only tackles 1/3 of our emissions profile, and the major challenge are the 2/3 of unavoidable process emissions. And this is a little bit where we are looking towards you guys in the research field, basically, because I think you mentioned it earlier on when we started this webinar, that fundamental research is the main area of research institutes. And this is what we need. So basically, we are looking as Heidelberg Cement, when we look towards carbon neutrality, for deploying technologies which are usually abbreviated as CCU or CCS, meaning the carbon capture and then utilization of the CO2, which we prefer, of course. And if it's not possible another way, that we have to store these sequestered or this captured CO2 volumes. And for using the CO2, as I said, this is 2/3 of our direct emissions. We have to look to you guys coming up with brilliant ideas what we can do with the CO2 in the end. So life sciences can basically play a big role into that when we are looking into microorganisms that could eat or feed on CO2, for example.
So you're saying that at the moment you have a plant where you produce the raw materials, the cement, etc., and then the CO2 that happens out of the chemical reaction is simply just let into the atmosphere. And you're saying you have a sort of a concentrate, a CO2 concentrate in a way that can be used as a source for microbes, plants, algae, etc., to carbon fix exactly that.
Exactly.
That
exactly. This is what we are looking into currently. So we are scaling capture technologies on the one hand. So getting the CO2 out of our flue gas, bringing it to a concentration of 95% and more, likely towards 100% purity in the CO2, that you can use it for many applications.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are looking into sustainable applications, which means that this CO2 should find an application where it can be bound for a long time, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we are looking into options to utilize the CO2 that would substitute other products that have a higher carbon footprint. To give you an example, as we were mentioning that, we have a project in Morocco currently operating where microalgae feed on our CO2 flue gas coming from our cement plant. It's currently a quite small application. So we are currently scaling up to 4 hectares, which is basically only giving us at the current point in time 400 kilograms of CO2 reduction. But there's an interesting nudge in that, and that is that 1 kilogram of these microalgae consumes 2 kilograms of CO2. So our idea is to scale that up towards 2026, looking towards 4,000 hectares installation in Morocco, and then capturing already 400,000 tons of CO2 with that installation. And the products, so the microalgae that we are cultivating, we intend to sell as fish food, for example, because this is in aquaculture usually a big issue that soybeans are being used, which have a high amount of transport emissions, agricultural sector emissions, and we can reduce these emissions with our competing products. This is one end that we are looking into. But of course, as I mentioned earlier on, there's a huge amount of CO2 that we need to utilize. So we are looking into all directions what we can do with the CO2, and therefore also looking towards you guys, because we need the fundamental research basically to find more applications for CO2.
So jumping in, I'm hearing that you need the information from the scientists to really know how to target this, right, Christoph? But I'm also guessing that you're going to need the support of someone like Teresa, where there's policy and there's government support behind this to really finance this and support it from a, I guess, a financial standpoint, for lack of a better word. You are a company, you are a business, you need to exist in 20 years as well. Am I right?
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail on the head, basically. So on the one hand, it's a triangle in which we all need to cooperate. So we need, on the one hand, the research institutes who are doing the fundamental research that we as an industry then can utilize for scaling it up on industrial scale. But this will only work if we have the right framework conditions to do so. So this is, on the one hand, political funding support for basic research, but also creating the right framework conditions when it comes to infrastructure demands, renewable energy demands, etc., that are there, because you mentioned it. So our interest as Heidelberg Cement is to be climate neutral in 2050, but still profitable as a business. So that's what we want. And
it's not an easy balance, is it? Definitely not. So I'm going to give you a small homework assignment while I talk to Teresa, Christoph. There's some interesting questions for you in the chat. Check them out and see if you can answer a few, because people are asking great questions as we go on. So Teresa, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for joining us. You've heard how science is crucial. You've heard how science feeds into the industry. Now what we need is to know a bit more from your standpoint of how you are working on the political framework to support this. So could you please give me a few concrete examples of your vision, how you as a government official are trying to support this, and how your hope is to better support and strengthen the role and impact of life science in these kinds of projects? You're muted, Teresa. You have to unmute yourself. Then you can talk, but we're all ears. Yes, there you are.
I saw it. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here with you, and thank you for the organization of this beautiful event. I think there are different things important at the same time. One thing is that fundamental research needs basic financial support and continuous support, because it needs time to do good research. But I also think it's very important to focus on the same goals. And we try to do this within our government, to focus on main goals and the very important challenges. We try to work on this from different perspectives at the same time. And these are climate change, and this is the loss of biodiversity, and this is how to shape the transformation processes and to create new job opportunities. For example, for new and green mobility we need in Baden-Württemberg, especially because this is a state very dependent on mobility and automobiles. So we try to strengthen and to focus our efforts within the government, but also, and that's very important. Oh,
Oh, she's so excited.
I came back. It's very important to encourage exchange and cooperation across different areas in specific disciplines, because we need people from different perspectives to work together and to solve the problems. So we need the cooperation between science, politicians, and enterprises to work on the same issue and goal. So we organized in Baden-Württemberg something like a strategic cooperation and strategic debate on a future mobility solution. And we're bringing together automotive companies and their suppliers, along with environmental organizations, government scientists, and we want to develop new climate-friendly mobility and to create new jobs and in common effort. And I think we need more of these new formats of collaboration, also about climate change, for example. And I think in that respect, we need scientists on these issues of healthy planet. For example, we introduced a new format, we call it a Living Lab or Reallabor in Baden-Württemberg. And we try to bring together scientists together with the local stakeholders from politics and the community and businesses to work on concrete solutions for issues such as climate protection or healthier or more livable cities. And I think that's very important to be in touch between these different sectors and areas of our society to understand better the perspective of the others.
I couldn't agree more. These kinds of dialogues where we're all, okay, in the same Zoom room and we hope soon at the same round table are really, really important to have these discussions. Therese, could you tell us a few of your key priorities beyond? I mean, I'm hearing the theme green cities and greener living. Do you have a few tangible? The mobility is also important. I guess I'm going to selfishly pull this question back to us as scientists. So is the Baden-Württemberg government trying to do any special support for green initiatives in terms of research or science, or even, coming up with these fantastic partnerships between industry, science, and politicians? Is this at all within the vision for the coming years?
One point, I mentioned it, but we try to bring them together on certain topics. And we also try to encourage our scientists and our universities to develop their own strategies on climate change and to try to define their own measures. So I've committed all the universities of Baden-Württemberg in the state to set their own climate targets and to define what is each university doing to prevent climate change, or how they will measure their success in this area and how they will achieve their success. And these details, they have to make it public, and they have to encourage discussion and debate about this within the whole community of their universities. And we started a competition for the first climate neutral university, and we award prizes for the best and the most ambitious concepts. So we try to encourage the pioneers who are thinking and working on this kind of issues. Our state level activities is not so strong on new research program lines, because our main effort is to give them the basic funding they need for a successful performance. But this kind of new formats and motivation for the pioneers, I think it's needed also for the public, because they need to see the efforts and the contributions of our science to solve these problems of very large interest of the public.
Yeah, I fully agree with you.
Theresa, can I quickly jump in? Because I see two major issues here. One of them is sometimes we do not have yet the solutions, and we need to research and have unions towards reaching that goal. Sometimes we know the solution, but implementing the solution seems to be very tricky and very difficult. Where do you see the key bottlenecks at the moment, and how would you address particularly the second one, implementation?
Yes, it's true. It's true. Implementation is a very complicated issue, also for politicians, and our decisions and our goals. It's not enough to define them and to focus on them. The implication to us is also very complicated. So sometimes it's an administration issue. Sometimes it's a financial issue to bring together different funding lines. And in general, talking about climate change, for example, what's most important is the acceptance and the ability of people to share this opinion and to change themselves and to transform, to change their own lives. Because democratic policy only is able to do something if people understand this kind of policy and accept them. So it is very, very important to us as politicians that the voice of science is heard. We need science to speak out about their knowledge, about the importance to change and to transform our production and our manner of life. Because without this acceptance in the general public, politicians can't do anything. So I think it's very, very important for politicians to create formats where people can hear and understand understand the knowledge that is offered by science.
No, I completely agree. I absolutely agree that communication and transporting the information from science to the public is an absolute key feature. I mean, the last comment I have, and maybe I'm biased or this is subjective, but I also maybe a small advice to politics. I think what's very interesting about particular life science researchers is that on a daily basis, we are studying biological phenomena that are by default sustainable. And this is our daily thinking. And I think politics would be very well advised to simply listen more often to science or scientists, especially from the biology area. Because I think in the long run, I mean, we have had this now during the COVID crisis. I think it is a beautiful example in time lapse in a way, because I mean, this is such a fast development where I think we learned a lot of lessons, and scientists are interested, they're passionate about understanding sustainable solutions. They are not driven by financial interests, etc. I think these are very interesting sort of friends in crime when it comes to designing long-term solutions to the problems that we face, because only the long-term solutions will fix the problem. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Teresa, for sharing your insight and your knowledge and your vision with us. And in the interest of time, unfortunately, we have to already move on and come to our last contributor to this session, Matthias Henze. Matthias, you have, I think, really spearheaded and strongly supported in the last couple of years these environmental initiatives at EMBL Heidelberg and EMBL as a whole. You have helped to set up the Environment Research Initiative. Why did you start this, and what is your vision? How does that go in hand in hand with your RNA biology history?
Well, answer to the second question first. Apart from RNA playing a role in all life processes, as we know, it doesn't have a special connection. The connection comes from a different angle. You know, the discussion throughout the afternoon, I think, has made it clear how many problems with pollution we really face in the oceans, in the air, in the soil, in our foods, everywhere. I think we all realize that there are two ways to tackle this problem. One is change behavior, change how we act. The second is, you know, find new solutions through science. And I don't think there's one answer. I think we need both. Deep down, we all know we should change our behaviors. But let's look at the COVID crisis. You know, we all knew very early on in the crisis that distancing and wearing masks and certain behavioral aspects would help, bring down the size, the dimension of the problem. And this worked to some extent, but without science having provided a vaccine, RNA vaccine, within a record-breaking time, we would be in a really, really bad state. So the point is, science is an absolute requirement for tackling and finding solutions for the biggest problems we face. Just changing behaviors is simply not enough and doesn't work across us humans with all our little faults. So having been at EMBL, as it has been said, for over 30 years, I've experienced how EMBL, how life sciences in general, but EMBL in particular, has an environment from fantastic technical outfit to a research culture that is highly collaborative, that is highly driven to bring together different elements of expertise. And that has helped over the last 40 years of EMBL's existence to really come up with critical answers largely unrelated to environmental science. What if EMBL would throw its power, in addition to what it does, also at this problem? And Edith has outlined our future scientific program. And you've seen from some of my colleagues that people who are currently at EMBL already are tackling some such problems. My vision is that we need to bring in additional young, creative, motivated people, not necessarily molecular biologists, who realize that some of the answers that they could give could be fostered, could be helped by working at EMBL and bringing in molecular biology. So that's the idea of the Environmental Research Initiative. And there's also, to finish my answer to your question, there's also personal motivation. I actually started the Environmental Research Initiative with a small private donation, because turning 60, I felt that, I've spent a good number of decades enjoying being a researcher. But for the upcoming next time in research, I really wanted to help with this problem. And I also wanted to help with this problem, not purely for professional reasons, but also, quite honestly, to leave a better planet for my grandchildren. I have 4 grandchildren.
Thank you so much, Matthias. I mean, I very much agree on the idea that awareness is there to a large extent. What is important now is to shift from awareness to action. And that is what I really like about EMBLs. And it doesn't come at first. I mean, who would have thought that EMBL, a molecular biology laboratory at heart, would be a pioneer here, and I think this is exactly what it needs. EMBL has the stature. EMBL has the political connections in Europe, etc., and it serves as a really powerful role model. Therefore, which I find very, very interesting. Now, I have another question to you, because you have been exposed a lot to industry on one side, but also to policymakers during your years at EMBL, serving in various different roles. Where do you see the key bottlenecks to not only generate the will to have these 3 sectors working together, but to also do it in a functional manner, so that the end product or the vision or the goal can be reached and is sustainable?
I'll answer your question in a second, but let me just say one thing with relation to when we were discussing CO2. We all know CO2 as a climate killer. As biologists, we also know that CO2 is a biological building block. Organisms can use CO2 and turn it back into biological building blocks. So if with the knowledge of molecular biology, we can achieve such progress, that would be fantastic. And both of us know that some such efforts are ongoing. And this is exactly where we link up with industry, for example, with Heidelberg Cement. We cannot help them avoid CO2. That's their problem. That's their responsibility. But where we can help them is to start with what they are currently using in Morocco as microorganisms and make them better. If we can find microorganisms for that usage that work 5 times better, you can imagine what the impact of that would be. So there's clearly many possibilities for solutions. I'm not trying to overpromise. I'm not trying to say for science it will be easy to find solutions. But what I'm saying is for science it will be possible to find solutions. And therefore, in working with members of the political sphere and in working with philanthropists and with industry on all these levels, it is important that we not simply repeat the mantra, fundamental research is necessary and is helpful. They have heard it so many times and it sort of almost becomes unheard. I think what needs to become clear is that the best possible investment of money you can make, bang for the buck, is investments into research, because the outcomes of that are catalytic if successful. And I think it's that message, the catalytic nature of investment, and I'm really talking also about financial investment, or primarily about financial investment, because ultimately it's funds that are limiting. The brains are not limiting. The know-how as a starting point is not limiting. I think it's those aspects that need to be communicated clearly and succinctly. And I think if we all work together in that way, and if EMBL and institutions like EMBL become turn 2 points, immediate turn 2 points for finding solutions, then I think we're on a path that I would very, very much like to support, for the next 10 years or however long, EMBL and life allows me to do so.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Matthias. Erin, do we have some questions from the chat?
I've been trying to go through. It's like, wow, there is an explosion going on here. So I don't know how brave we all are. Are we brave, gentlemen? We've lost Teresa. She's run away. We've scared her. I think it's worth trying to maybe do some of the hard discussions, because that's why we're here, right? I actually almost, I have to say, I feel like Christoph needs a special medal of courage for joining this discussion, because you represent a huge polluting industry and you could get so easily flagged as the bad guy when actually you're here. I think you're trying to be the good guy. It's just that you have a monumental challenge ahead of you. So I hope this doesn't backfire. I'd like to promote discussion. I'd like to have people involved. So Miriam, you've shared a lot of information in the chat. Would you like to join our discussion? You had a great question for Matthias, and I think this is also feeds into the collaboration with Christoph. Ask your question and let's see if we can launch a healthy debate, shall we say. The floor is yours, Miriam.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, my question was initially directed to Christoph, exactly as a representative of Heidelberg Cement. And as I'm trying to understand sort of hypocrisy, I think, which is happening in terms of the exploitation of land, which is happening for the past 15 years in Indonesia, Togo, Palestine, and West Sahara. Yeah, how does the exploitation of land, reduction of biodiversity, displacement of people and forcing them living in the refugee camps, silencing them when the diaspora speaks out on the issues, how does that all goes in line with your will to save the planet and give us some future by fixing CO2 while you are contributing in another way to destroying the planet and basically continuing the colonial and post-colonial practices which Europe has been persistently doing around the world?
Ooh, that's a heavy question. Okay, so first of all, I would just moderate this slightly and say, I think Christoph is not technically destroying the planet. He might work for a company that does, but he's not the bad guy. Don't feel attacked, please. I think though that these questions are very important. So are you ready, Christoph, to try and tackle this? Okay, go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, let me start with one point first when it comes to extractive activities. Maybe I start with that point first. Of course, we are mining limestone and make cement out of it. And this is happening in quarries, no question about that. And there it's quite important for us as a company, and this is basically then also relevant for our social license to operate, to be able to operate a quarry and to open a quarry, is to follow international standards and norms when it comes to implementing that, and then also to implement best practice into that. So for example, we have the Quarry Life Award, which is an biannual research competition that we are funding as Heidelberg Cement, where it's about finding best practices for mining and nature conservation in the end. So for example, we are implementing programs to implement special habitats for birds who will not find habitats anymore in Europe, for example, or in other world regions, because these habitats do basically not exist anymore. This is also the case when we are speaking about a rehabilitation or renaturation efforts of depleted mining sites in the end. So every mining site has an after-use plan, and where we negotiate with our stakeholders on the ground on the most environmentally friendly solutions, which is sometimes, depending on the region that you are, rehabilitating a quarry towards a nature reserve or rehabilitating it into agricultural land or into forests. So this is really a local negotiation that is being done with the stakeholders, and there you have to find a compromise. But nevertheless, our goal is to be minimum as invasive as possible when it comes to the extractive activities. Now tackling the other part of the question, which is concerned with, I would say, human rights concerns and the whole area of business and human rights. There we implemented a lot of management measures in the past years with the upcoming of UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, the OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises, the German activities as well, which is the National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights. So we follow these documents and we are pushing for the implementation of these standards and assess, of course, our own operations in light of these standards. And I mean, this is the issue with human rights and business context in that sense, sometimes even a question of interpretation in the end. So we did our assessments also with the help of external parties who assessed our operations. And we came to the conclusions that we are in line with international law, with international standards in all our operations, basically. I can understand that some people do disagree with that, and everywhere where you invest in a huge project or where you have extractive activities, you have local communities not unilaterally against such an activity or unilaterally for such an activity. So there's always controversy on the ground, and this is what needs to be solved on local level. With regard, for example, what I saw in the thread with regard to our Israeli operation and one quarry over there, we have a court ruling from the Supreme Court in Israel, which that it's compliant with international humanitarian law. So from that perspective, it's up for discussion between the different parties to see if you agree with such a ruling or not. And this is basically the question. But the more fundamental issue is in the end, really to say that our idea as a company is, and as we are a major emitter, as a heavy polluter, that we have to do our homework in the end. And that's what we are doing basically on all fronts, not just on the environmental front, but also, of course, in the other sustainability dimensions as well. Because in the end, it needs to be a systematic or holistic approach that you have to pick for your company, and for, I would say, for every entity who is concerned with sustainability. And with that regard, of course, we are looking into reducing our CO2 footprint, as well as we intend to reduce our energy demand, other emissions in our flue gas bus as well, supporting our local operations in being as minimum invasive as possible.
That is a very broad answer. Thank you very much. I think this is such an important topic and not an easy topic. And there are so many different angles to approach this. I think though, one thing for me that readily resonates is that you need the public to be motivated to invest in the right, in purchasing the right practices and focusing on supporting these changes. And this has to come from a ton of different standpoints, not just the climate, but also humanitarian standpoint. Matthias, I see a hand. Tell me.
Maybe I should also weigh in on this topic that was raised. Let me first say, I think it's perfectly fair to ask us, EMBL, have you really thought about, whether or not to engage with Heidelberg Cement if, these are all the topics that are being raised? I think that's an absolutely fair question to ask. My answer would be, first of all, I don't think we are in a situation where we should be passing judgment, a positive or a negative judgment on the company and make that more important than helping to solve a dire problem. I think science, the arts, maybe the sports are those disciplines of humankind that break boundaries, that try to work together as communities, and to bridge situations where problems have arisen. So what I'm trying to say is we have thought very critically about whether we provide a bridge for Heidelberg Cement to greenwash or so. But we have seen that we can be and partners in solving a problem regarding the climate killer CO2. And to me, it is critical that pursuing opportunities that are of severe consequence for humankind, we must not put judgment over the benefit of humankind at large. And I completely acknowledge the seriousity and the relevance of the questions that were asked.
All right, Brendan, did you have a thought, or did that thought come and go?
Yeah, no, I had a thought. It's kind of an important thing. So Miriam in her question kind of said Heidelberg Cement was trying to save the world. I think we need to acknowledge that Heidelberg Cement is in no way trying to save the world. Heidelberg Cement, like almost all major listed companies, have a primary focus, which is providing stakeholder value. They're legally obliged to look after their shareholders' investments. What Heidelberg Cement are going to be in is in competition with all the other cement producers to provide the cement that society demands in the most environmentally friendly way. Ultimately, it's the society that's demanding that. It's the same with Shell and Exxon, who have suffered defeats in the courts last week. And great, really good news for the environmental movement. But what we've got to be wary of is that the public don't continue to demand all that fossil fuel, and Shell's and Exxon's fields and their gas resources aren't sold to somebody who is even less responsible than them, because ultimately somebody will deliver that fossil fuel if society demands it. Which is why I was going back again. It's conscious decisions every day from society is really important here. And that includes EMBL and our scientists. Again, as I said, the buildings that we build, can we look at reducing maybe cement that's built in those? And that can be our signal. Whether or not we can move away from cement 100% is really, I guess, unlikely. But we can at least be a voice and raise our feeling that it's important that we build sustainable buildings, that we buy sustainable laboratory products, because somebody will always provide a service if the demand is there. That was all.
I couldn't agree more. Okay. I would like one more question from the audience. So Freddie, are you ready to ask a question? Because you've put some great questions in the chat, but we have to keep it short because we've had so much fun. We've almost used up our whole time window. The floor is yours, Freddie.
It wasn't my question, and thanks for having me in there. Great discussions, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be and listening here. My question was about the CO2 that we produce as scientists, if we actually know this, and whether we just having that knowledge would allow us to, cut in the flights that we're all taking and and so on. But I'd like to also make a quick statement towards what Brendan just said. You know, we can make, of course, sustainable buildings and all these things, but if they come at 2 or 3 times the costs, that's not for free, right? I'm sitting in a research building that costs 20 million euros. If that would have cost 40 million euros, where did the 20 extra million come from, right? So I would just like to appreciate everybody think back and say somebody needs to work for that money, right? And that somebody ultimately is possibly Heidelberg Cement, right? And you know, let's just not be too naive in what we can do and what we cannot do, and try not to over-regulate things. That would be a statement from my side, because I mean, you want to work with infectious diseases, well, come down here. We're working on infectious diseases, right? And it's a total nightmare to be able to work with infectious diseases. Would have been my message to Teresa, right? Just please try and cut the tape that's involved with all this. This will save a lot of CO2, right?
Well, I can probably answer the question, the first one at least, about, so the life science research industry is behind, let's say, the private sector when it comes to understanding its carbon footprints, its impacts. The reason is,
isn't that embarrassing as hell? You know.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I think there's a very good reason for it, though, is that, you know, private sector, responds to an external pressure, legislation, shareholders, customers. Life science research, where does that external pressure? There really isn't much of one. It's all coming from within. And that's why I think actually life science research is a little bit behind. So having joined this industry like a year ago, no, I couldn't tell you what the average, let's say, carbon footprint per square meter of a research facility is, because the industry isn't as transparent as others. And that's, I think, one of the important things about our strategy going forward, is that we want to make it more transparent. We want to tell people what our carbon footprint is and ways that we want to reduce it, because life science is really kind of playing catch up here. If that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
That was great. I fear we're even over time now by a minute. Julius, we have to wrap up. It's sad. The discussion's over. I can only say a huge thank you to all of our moderators, to all of the discussions. I think these are very important discussions to have. They're not easy. And I think it's really good that we're all here at the table. Have we answered everything today? No. Have we even started? Just barely by the micron. We've really only started, but I think really the key is we've started these discussions and we need to keep having them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was a little silent the last few minutes, thought a lot about it. This is, I think, an interesting come together of people that want change, people that need to make change because they otherwise would financially not survive the future, and people that know that this is very tricky. And there's, of course, I mean, I just think in the past decades, hundreds of years, humans have exploited not only nature and resources, but of course also exploited human rights in massive ways. And this has been raised here. And I just can only say what drives me forward is think positive about the future and try to change things. And of course, it's important to know the past, but similarly important, and maybe even more important, is it to embrace in change and in thinking positive about it. And that's also why I think you, Erin, and me are here as moderators. We are not at EMBL, but we are feeling very close to this research institution. And to me, I think this was a great event that hopefully sparked not only discussions and critical questions, but also positive actions and action, right?
I think that's the key. We all need action and we all need to do our part. So I thank everyone. There will be a follow-up email from the main event organizers where you'll get lots of links and lots of information. Please keep an eye on the EMBL Planetary Biology program. I think it has great things ahead of us in terms of trying to address this from a scientific standpoint. And really our biggest thanks to our the brave people who joined us, especially Christoph. I feel he could have been attacked a bit and he courageously did this. So thank you very much to you. We really need to do this as a team and we will be better for it. Wishing you all a very good day, be it morning, evening, lunchtime, wherever you are in the world. And we hope to see you again sometime soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.